The Auditor General John Mwanga and his team today appeared before the Deputy Speaker of Parliament Anita Mong to present the annual report for the financial period 2020-2021.
It's quite heavy. Okay.
The report also indicates that after the passing of the budget, only 51% of the funds were used, indicating that 49% of the funds were not used, mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
We observed that the entities were able to implement 51% of the activities that had been budgeted for. They were able to do 42% partially, and then 7% of the activities sampled were not implemented at all. As I mentioned earlier, this was attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic largely, but also the inadequate funding, poor contract management practices, and change of priorities without corresponding availability of resources.
According to the Auditor General's report, in regards to the national debt, not much has changed from last year. The report shows that Uganda's national debt has further increased.
The debt as at 30th June 2021 stood at 69.6 trillion, of which domestic debt or stock was 25.3, and external debt stock was valued at 44.3 trillion. This is an increase of about 13.4 trillion from the last year's debt of about 56.9. We note three things under debt. We note that although Uganda's GDP ratio is still below the IMF recommended point of safety, that is 50%, Uganda's GDP to debt ratio is 47, and it has increased by 6% from the previous year.
On the salaries of people working in local governments, the Auditor General's report highlights a lot of discrepancies in payment of taxes and pension funds.
About 7.32 billion that was deducted from the salaries of staff was retained and not paid out to URA in respect of pay as you earn, as was required by the law. 78 local governments paid a total of 1.1 billion to 635 staff who had either retired, had been transferred, absconded, or died, hence causing financial loss to government.
Some key issues that stood out in the report that was made public today include the finding that government through the Ministry of Education and Sports managed to release 23 billion shillings for printing of home study materials. However, according to the Auditor General's report, study materials had not been printed, or the funds were used on other things or lying idle on accounts. Simon Chris Makanga, CTV PM edition.